Okay, we're almost done. We just covered in part 2 phrases. Now in part 3, we're going to talk about clauses. Okay, we've studied various kinds of clauses, noun, adjective, and adverb clauses. Just to quickly review, clauses have a subject and a verb in them. Sometimes they can stand alone. They're called independent when they can. But these in particular are dependent clauses. So let's take a look. Number 1, we all laughed when Jeremy told that joke at lunch. Okay, when was in the list of subordinating conjunctions that you memorized. And the word when should spark a memory. What questions do adverbs answer? One of the questions adverbs answers, they tell when. So this whole clause is answering the question when. When did this laughing take place? It happened when Jeremy told that joke at lunch. So since it's modifying this verb, laughed, we know it's an adverb clause. Okay. Number 2, this is the quilt which my grandmother made for me. Okay. So this is also modifying something, but in this case, it's not modifying a verb, it's modifying this noun quilt. Which quilt? Exactly which quilt? Well, the one grandmother made. So it's modifying a noun. Which one of these 3 would modify a noun? An adjective. Adjective clause. Okay. Another thing you might do if you're nervous about this is go back and review the signal words or the beginning words for adverb clauses, noun clauses, and adjective clauses. There are some overlapping words, but some of them are like which is never going to start an adverb clause. If that makes sense. Okay. So that could help you prepare. Number 3, that the stranded motorist needed help was obvious to the policeman. Okay, so instead of having a tacked on dependent clause, this dependent clause actually is operating as one of the parts of sentence for the main clause. Here we have the verb of the main clause. It's a linking verb. Here we have a predicate adjective, obvious. What equals obvious? This whole fact, this whole thing, this whole clause. So that clause is acting as the subject of the sentence. And so, since it's a subject of the sentence, we got to call it a noun clause. So without this dependent noun clause, this whole thing couldn't be an independent clause. So sometimes clauses are hidden inside another clause. Okay? Lastly, the thing you covered this past week was, the thing you're doing this week, the unit that I told you can do odds only on because it's a long unit. It's sentence complexity, and the way you tell the complexity of a sentence is by counting how many clauses of which kind are in your sentence. So 2 kinds of clauses. You have independent. I'm going to make a little chart for you. Independent clauses and dependent clauses. Now, all right, we're going to say how many of each are in each kind of sentence. So a simple sentence has 1 independent clause and no dependent clauses. Now, that does not mean it's short, because a sentence could have a compound subject and a compound verb and be sort of long, but still be a simple sentence. For example, the boy and the girl climbed up the hill and fetched a pail of water. There I had 2 subjects, 2 verbs, but the way they're put together, that's still a simple sentence. It's 1 independent clause. Okay? A compound sentence has 2 or more independent clauses, but it still has no dependent clauses. So, the boy went up the hill and the girl followed him to carry the water back down. There we had 2 independent clauses. They could stand alone on their own, but they're joined with a coordinating conjunction and a comma. Another way that 2 independent clauses could be joined is with a semicolon. So watch out for those. Compound sentences. Now, a complex sentence has only one independent clause, but it has one or more dependent clauses. So you might have a sentence that starts with when, like, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. So that first clause is dependent. The second one was independent, only had one independent clause there. I spoke like a child. So that would be considered a complex sentence. You could have more than one dependent one and it still be considered only complex. However, if you get more than one complex, if you get two or more independent clauses and the presence of one or more dependent, it's called compound complex. And those are longer sentences. Be careful when you use those. They're great, but be careful to punctuate carefully if you're using compound complex sentences. Okay, let's try a few. The wise man builds his house upon the rock. Let's just identify all the subjects and verbs. Builds, there's the action. Man. Do you see any other subjects and verbs? No. The rest are just complements and modifiers. So that would be one independent clause. Therefore, it's categorized as simple. Let's look at this one. Ooh, there's a semicolon, a dead giveaway that this is going to be compound. Take fast hold of instruction, let her not go. Let's find the subjects and verbs. Well, this isn't a regular declarative. This is a command, an imperative. So it's an understood subject of you. You take, and this one happens to be the same. It's a command also. You let. Okay. So here we have subject and verb. Subject and verb, each one could stand alone. It would make sense on its own. It's joined by a semicolon. Therefore, I have two independent clauses and no dependents. So that is a compound sentence. When men are employed, they are best contented. I had you memorize those subordinating conjunctions for a reason, so that you would notice them as they go by. This comma is really important. Sometimes people forget it. If you start out a sentence with a dependent clause, set it apart with a comma. So when men are employed, there's your subject and verb. It can't stand alone, can it? So this is a dependent clause. Now let's look at this clause. They are best contented. So this one can stand alone. It is independent clause. Look back at our chart. We have one of each. Therefore, it's a complex sentence. And last, nurture your mind with great thoughts. So that's again a command, you nurture. It could stand alone, right? It makes sense. For, comma, and for, reaching way back, that's a coordinating conjunction, which means it joins clauses of equal rank. And, but, or, nor, for, and yet join clauses of equal rank. So you will go, another independent clause. And look, you think, oh, it's just two independent clauses, but lurking inside this independent clause, let me go ahead and label it independent clause. I have two independent clauses, but inside there, look at this, higher than you think. Right here, we have a dependent clause. Than you think can't stand alone. The than made it subordinate. So here we have a dependent clause. So three clauses altogether, two independents, one dependent. Check your chart, and you'll see that that is indeed a compound, complex sentence. Okay. Hopefully that's all clear as a bell. The last thing on your test, there are 5 general knowledge questions about the book Through Gates of Splendor. Remember what I've always told you. You should always know who the author is, right? When you read a book, you should know who the people are in the book and what was going on. Just very general questions. I don't even require you to remember like all the people's names. Basically, what were they doing, what was their goal, and what happened to them. I do ask you a personal application question. I've been asking you to think about that as you read the book, as you see their lives. what challenges you, some area you might need to grow in, or something you admire and want to be like in that person. So that part should not be hard if you've read the book. And that's it. Good luck on your test. If you need more help or have more questions, let me know.